I came home from work on a Tuesday evening, exhausted but relieved that the long shift was finally over. I reached for my keys only to find the lock jammed. Confused, I tried again. Then I noticed the gleaming brass, brand new, freshly installed. My stomach dropped. When I knocked, laughter drifted from inside. Not my wife's alone. A man's voice echoed through the living room I'd furnished, the home I'd paid for. That was the night I realized the woman I loved had replaced me before I even opened the door. My name is Aaron. I'm 35, a project manager for a mid-sized construction company in Ohio. Most of my life has been about building things that last. Roads, bridges, houses that families would call home for decades. Stability was my currency. Predictability was my comfort. And for the last 8 years, I thought I'd built something just as enduring in my marriage to Claire. Claire and I met at a friend's backyard barbecue. She was radiant, witty in that effortless way that made everyone around her lean in closer. I was slower, more deliberate, the kind of guy who needed a blueprint before moving forward. Somehow, she liked that about me. She called me her rock, I believed her. We bought our modest 2-story home together 5 years ago. I handled the mortgage. She added her flair through decorating, filling the rooms with colors and textures I never would have chosen myself but quickly grew to love. Our division of labor was simple. I worked long hours, sometimes weekends, while Claire managed our social calendar and kept the household humming. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it felt solid. Or at least it used to. The cracks started small. Claire's late nights out with friends from yoga. Her phone, once left carelessly on the counter, now glued to her palm. New outfits arriving at the house. Dresses I never saw her wear around me. I noticed, of course. But noticing is different from believing. Every time suspicion brushed against my ribs, I'd shove it away with logic. She's allowed to have her own life. I work too much. Maybe I'm the one drifting. There was even a brief period when I convinced myself she was planning a surprise for me. Maybe a trip or an anniversary gift. I wanted so badly for the odd behavior to mean something good. After all, isn't that what trust is? Believing the best even when it doesn't make sense? But the distance grew. Conversations shrank to logistics, bills, groceries, schedules. Her smile at me felt rehearsed, her kisses absent-minded. And yet, I kept telling myself that marriages went through phases, that after the next project ended, after I finally had time to breathe, things would slide back into place. I didn't know then that while I was busy building highways and balancing budgets, Claire was building an escape plan, one that ended with me locked out of my own home. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Claire's yoga nights grew more frequent. Twice a week became 3, then 4. At first, she'd come home flushed, smelling faintly of lavender lotion, hair tied up in a messy bun. Later, she'd creep in near midnight, her perfume sharper, her laughter still lingering in her throat. When I asked how class was, she'd shrug and say, "Good." You know, same stretches as always, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced the line in the car. Her phone became a fortress. She'd flip its screen down at the dinner table, carry it into the bathroom, even sleep with it tucked under her pillow. Once, while she was showering, her phone buzzed with a message. I wasn't proud of myself, but curiosity tugged me toward it. I picked it up, locked, of course. The preview on the screen read only, "Can't wait to see you again." My heart hammered against my ribs. Before I could think, I put the phone back exactly as it was, like it burned to the touch. At work, I found myself distracted. I'd be reviewing budgets or walking job sites, and Claire's vague smiles or that text preview would flash in my mind. My coworkers joked that I looked like I hadn't slept. They weren't wrong. One Saturday morning, I suggested we go out for breakfast, just the two of us. A simple thing. Coffee, pancakes, conversation without distractions. She blinked at me like I'd asked her to move across the country. "I already promised the girls I'd meet them for brunch," she said, sliding her phone into her bag. Rain check? I nodded, but inside something cracked. The Claire I married would have leapt at the chance for a date. The Claire I lived with now always seemed to be rushing away from me. Still, I tried to explain it away. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she was stressed. I buried myself in work again, convincing myself I was imagining things. That suspicion was the real enemy, not her. But deep down, a truth was taking root, one I was too afraid to face. I wasn't her rock anymore, I was just her placeholder. It wasn't one big explosion that confirmed my fears, it was the slow drip, drip, drip of moments that didn't add up. Claire began dressing differently for her so-called yoga nights. Not just leggings and a sweatshirt, but carefully chosen outfits. A silk camisole peeking out from under a fitted jacket. Heels she never wore for me anymore. One evening I caught a whiff of cologne clinging to her scarf, sharp and masculine. When I asked about it, she laughed a little too quickly. Probably from hugging one of the girls goodbye. You know how perfume lingers. Her excuses grew bolder. She'd forget what lie she told the week before, claiming she was at yoga on a night when the studio was closed for renovations, insisting she grabbed drinks with coworkers I later learned had been out of town. Each contradiction was a paper cut to my sanity, small but stinging. Meanwhile, at home, she acted like a guest in her own house. She'd leave dirty wine glasses on the counter, laundry half folded on the couch, as if none of it mattered anymore. Our conversations shrank into single-syllable exchanges. Dinner? I'd ask. Already ate, she'd reply without looking up from her phone. Then came the bank statement. I was going through our joint account one night when I noticed a series of charges at a downtown hotel. Small amounts at the bar, then larger ones billed to a room. The dates lined up perfectly with her extra yoga workshops. My chest tightened as if the numbers themselves were squeezing me. When I confronted her casually, she brushed it off. Oh, that's probably a mistake. Banks do that sometimes. She didn't even look surprised. Even her friends began to act strangely around me. At a mutual friend's barbecue, two of them avoided eye contact the whole evening. One finally asked, too innocently, "So, you and Claire doing okay?" I forced a smile, but my stomach twisted. They knew something I didn't. By then, every laugh she shared with someone else felt like betrayal. Every late night was a dagger. And though I hadn't caught her red-handed yet, I felt like I was living in a house where the ground shifted under my feet. Familiar walls, unfamiliar woman. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was being erased from my own life, one alibi at a time. The moment of truth didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with the sound of my own keys failing to fit. One Tuesday evening, after a long shift at the office, I walked up to our front porch like I had 1,000 times before. But when I slid my key into the lock, it stopped cold. I tried again. Same result. My own front door refused me. At first I thought maybe the lock was jammed. I pulled out my phone, ready to text Claire. That's when I noticed the porch light was off. She always left it on for me. Always. A small courtesy that suddenly felt like a missing heartbeat. I knocked. Silence. Then, footsteps. Not hers. Heavier. Confident. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, a shadow approached. My pulse hammered in my throat. The door swung open halfway, and a man I had never seen before stood in my doorway like he owned it. Tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt still half unbuttoned, his eyes coldly assessing me the way you'd size up a trespasser. Behind him, Claire's voice floated out. Light, carefree. "Who is it, babe?" Babe. She had never used that word for me. My chest caved in. I couldn't breathe. The man leaned against the frame, deliberately casual. "Claire's busy." "You should probably leave for a moment." My mind blanked. I looked past him into the hallway, the hall I had painted myself, the rug we'd picked out together. A man's jacket hung carelessly over the banister. My jacket had always hung there. Now it was gone. I caught a glimpse of Claire at the top of the stairs, hair tousled, wearing the robe I'd bought her for Christmas. She froze when she saw me. No guilt, no shame. Just annoyance, like I was an interruption to her evening. "Why are you here?" she asked flatly. The ground fell away beneath me. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This was betrayal written in every detail of my own stolen home. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My key still dangled useless in my hand, a symbol of everything I'd just lost. That was the night I realized the locks weren't just changed on the door. They were changed on my marriage, my life, and the woman I thought I knew. I don't remember how I got back to my car that night. One moment I was staring at the man in my doorway. The next I was sitting behind the wheel, my hands clenched so hard the leather creaked. The engine hummed under me, but I didn't drive. I just sat there in the darkness, headlights cutting across the street, my own house glowing faintly behind me. Except it wasn't mine anymore. My wife was inside with him, and the locks had confirmed what my heart hadn't wanted to admit. I was already gone. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears would come later in the hollow hours of morning. But that night I felt emptied out, like someone had reached inside and stolen not just my trust but my entire foundation. Eventually I drove, not home because I no longer had one, but to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. I nursed a bitter cup of coffee and stared at the chipped countertop until dawn. The waitress refilled my mug twice without asking questions. Bless her for that silence. By sunrise, I was parked outside my parents' house, debating whether to knock. But what would I even say? That Claire had locked me out and replaced me in a single night? That the life they thought I'd built was nothing but smoke? My father would clench his jaw and mutter about lawyers. My mother would try to hug me while secretly wondering how much of this was my fault. I couldn't face them. Not yet. So I called my best friend, Mason. The words came out jagged like glass in my throat. She changed the locks. There's someone else, silence on the line. Then a low whistle. Jesus, man. Where are you now? His voice cracked something in me, and before I knew it, I was parked outside his apartment. He opened the door in sweatpants, saw my face, and didn't even bother with questions. He just pulled me inside. For 2 days, I lived on Mason's couch. The world outside kept moving. Emails piling up at work, my phone buzzing with Claire's half-hearted messages. We need to talk. Don't make this. Harder than it has to be. And calls from my mother. I let ring out. Isolation settled in like fog. Mason tried, ordering pizza, cracking jokes, even dragging me to the gym. But grief has a way of weighing you down, making even small kindnesses feel too heavy to lift. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the silence afterward. The silence of a home I couldn't enter. The silence of a wife who no longer cared enough to explain. The silence of family who didn't yet know how shattered I really was. And in that silence, the truth pressed in. I wasn't just betrayed. I was erased. On the third day of sleeping on Mason's couch, Claire finally stopped sending vague texts and called. "Can you come by the house?" she asked, her tone clipped, as if I were the one inconveniencing her. The house. She didn't even stumble over the word. It was hers now, in her mouth, not ours. I almost hung up, but something inside me, some frayed, stubborn thread, needed to face her. Not for reconciliation, not for explanations I already knew in my bones, but for closure. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. So was his. I parked on the street anyway. Walking up the path felt like moving through a dream I didn't want to have. The house I'd painted, the porch I'd repaired with my own hands, everything looked the same, but I was no longer welcome. Claire opened the door, not bothering with pleasantries. She wore that same silk blouse I'd once bought her for a birthday dinner. Now it looked like a costume. "We need to figure this out," she said flatly. "There's nothing to figure out," I replied. My voice surprised me, steady, almost calm. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic." People split all the time. We'll sort the property, divide things fairly. You don't have to make this ugly, ugly. As if changing the locks while your husband's at work and letting another man cross the threshold wasn't already ugliness incarnate. I stepped inside just far enough that she couldn't shut the door in my face. The air smelled different. His cologne, maybe, or just the absence of mine. I didn't come here to fight, I said. I came to tell you this is the last time you'll see me in this house. You made your choice. I'm making mine. Claire blinked. She had expected anger, maybe pleading, but not this. You're walking away? Just like that? Yes. Her jaw worked as if she wanted to argue, but the words faltered. Maybe because, deep down, she knew the locks had already ended everything. You'll hear from my lawyer, I added, turning back toward the door. That got her attention. Lawyer? You don't have to. I cut her off with a quiet firmness I didn't know I had. You made it clear I wasn't a partner anymore. Don't expect me to play one now. And then I left. No slamming doors, no shouted accusations. Just the sound of my footsteps on the porch and the cool evening air filling my lungs. For the first time in days, I felt lighter. 6 months passed. The divorce papers were finalized, neat black ink on white pages. Cold, but freeing. I'd moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, a balcony just big enough for a chair, and a view of a coffee shop across the street. But it was mine. Mine in a way the old house hadn't been for years. I started cooking again, not because someone expected dinner on the table, but because I wanted to. I picked up running just to hear the sound of my own breath in the quiet morning streets. Life shrank in size but grew in meaning. From time to time, word of Claire trickled back through mutual acquaintances. The fairy tale didn't hold. The man she'd invited into our home. He didn't stay. After 3 months, he was gone, apparently unwilling to shoulder the same responsibilities I had carried without complaint. I didn't feel triumph when I heard. Just a strange sadness, almost pity. She had gambled everything and ended up with nothing but a hollow echo of what she thought was freedom. As for me, I was rebuilding. Slowly, steadily, in my own way. No grand gestures, no dramatic victories. Just quiet progress. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat on my balcony with a beer in hand, watching the lights flicker on in the apartments across the street. A couple laughed on their way into the cafe. Someone played guitar in an open window. The world was moving, living, breathing, without me carrying the weight of betrayal anymore. For years, I thought dignity meant holding everything together, no matter the cost. Now I knew the truth. Dignity was walking away when the locks changed, and never looking back.